I swear to you, there's nothing more stubborn in this world than campfire smoke. One evening, I'd set up camp along a little clearing near a pine ridge, the kind of place where the wind sighs through the needles like an old man humming a tune. I got the fire going, good and hot, crackling like it was glad to see me, and settled into my chair with a mug of strong coffee. Now, you'd think with all the space out there, smoke would have somewhere better to go than directly into my face. But no. I shifted to the left and the smoke curled after me like a jealous dog. I moved to the right, and there it was again, stinging my eyes, making me cough. I stood up, walked behind the fire, and for one blissful moment thought I'd outsmarted it. Then the breeze shifted, and the smoke chased me like it had been waiting for the game to start. The funny thing was, I wasn't alone. A buddy of mine, Carl, was with me. He sat on the other side of the fire, grinning through the haze while I sputtered and waved my arms. "Smoke follows beauty," he said, quoting that old line folks always trot out. I told him if that were true, then I was in real trouble, because the smoke wasn't letting me go. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee, right up until he tried swapping seats with me, and suddenly found himself gagging in the same gray cloud. By then it became less about comfort and more about principle. We spent the next hour circling that fire like fools, dragging chairs, swapping sides, even crouching low as if ducking under a stubborn enemy. Didn't matter what we tried, the smoke always found us. It was like the spirit of the fire was bound and determined to keep us humble, reminding us that in the wilderness, we don't ever get the last word. Carl finally gave up first. He stomped over to the cooler, muttering something about how he wasn't going to let a pile of burning sticks boss him around. He cracked open a bottle, sat himself down and said, "Fine, let it follow me. Maybe it'll give up if I don't fight it." I thought he was bluffing, but sure enough, the smoke shifted my way again, curling over like it was hunting me down. I decided to take the high ground. Literally. There was a big old rock a few steps off the clearing, just tall enough, and that kept us laughing until our sides ached. But the truth is, there was something eerie about it, too. No matter where we moved, no matter how far we stepped away, even when we put a good 10 yards between us and the flames, the smoke seemed to trail after one of us, like it was choosing its prey for the night. By the time we gave up the fight and sat side by side again, eyes burning and lungs raw, the forest around us had gone still. Too still. The crickets, the night birds, everything had gone quiet, like the whole place was holding its breath. I remember noticing how the smoke, instead of rising straight into the sky, hung low to the ground, spreading out in ghostly ribbons through the clearing. It swirled around our boots and crept into the trees like a fog with a mind of its own. Carl glanced at me, his grin gone now, and said in a low voice, "You ever get the feeling it ain't just the wind moving that smoke?" That was the moment I realized we weren't just battling a mischievous breeze. Something else was out there in the dark, something that made even the forest go silent. The silence was thick enough to notice, and that's saying something in the woods. Usually there's always some rustle, some chirp or croak, but not then. Carl set his bottle down and leaned forward, squinting into the dark like he was expecting something to step into the firelight. I didn't say a word at first, just listened. My ears strained so hard I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my head. Then it came, a shuffle, faint but steady, like a boot dragging across pine needles. It came from the tree line just beyond the clearing, right where the smoke had drifted deepest. Both of us froze. I told myself it could be a deer, or maybe a raccoon nosing around, but the sound was slow, deliberate, not the quick, nervous rustle of an animal. Carl reached for the hatchet lying by the woodpile. I wasn't far behind, my hand closing around the handle of my lantern. We sat there, waiting. The fire popped and hissed, throwing sparks, but the smoke just thickened and curled toward that sound like it was beckoning whatever was out there closer. The dragging step grew louder, then stopped. Nothing but the shifting of the smoke, twisting into shapes that seemed almost reach of the firelight. Carl stood halfway, hatchet raised, eyes wide and white in the glow. I kept my seat but leaned forward, every muscle tight, the smoke swirling around me as though the fire itself wanted to blind me. And that's when we both heard it, clear as day. A deep, ragged breath. Long, slow, just beyond the smoke. That breath. It wasn't the kind you mistake for wind. It was rough, strained, like air dragging through a throat not used to speaking. Carl and I locked eyes, neither of us wanting to be the first to admit we'd heard it. The fire crackled sharp, throwing sparks into the night, but the smoke pressed low, wrapping the clearing like a veil. Then, through that haze, a shape shifted. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks, smoke curling into a figure. But no, this was different. The outline was darker than the trees behind it, tall and broad-shouldered. It swayed slightly, as though it were trying to push forward, but the smoke itself was holding it back. Carl whispered, "Bear," but his voice cracked, betraying the fact he didn't believe it. Neither did I. A bear doesn't breathe like that, doesn't stand still like a shadow made of muscle and silence. We sat frozen, listening. The figure stayed at the edge, no more than a dozen paces away, just outside the ring of firelight. Every now and then, the smoke thinned enough for me to catch a glimpse, a glint like wet eyes, something shifting its weight, a sense of being watched with an intensity that pinned me to my chair. Finally, Carl did what I would never have dared. He stood tall, raised his hatchet high, and shouted into the night, "Hey! Get out of here!" His voice cracked across the clearing like a whip. For a heartbeat, silence. Then a sound came that I'll never forget. A low, guttural moan, deep and pained, as if it had come from the bottom of a hollow chest. The figure shifted, took one dragging step forward. The smoke rolled with it, thick and choking, wrapping around us and made us flinch. Around midnight, Carl finally said, "We can't just sit here waiting." He suggested we douse the fire, grab our gear, and hike back toward the road. But the thought of walking through those woods with only lantern light, and maybe that thing watching us, was worse than staying put. So we stayed, back straight, eyes on the tree line. It must have been hours later when the smoke finally began to lift. The crickets returned first, chirping as though nothing had happened. Then an owl hooted, far off but steady, and I realized how tense my shoulders had been, braced like stone. The forest was waking back up, and with it came a kind of relief, though neither of us said so aloud. When dawn broke, gray and thin, we saw the signs plain as day. Just beyond the clearing, where the smoke had been thickest, the ground was disturbed. Not tracks exactly, at least not like any I'd ever seen, but patches of pine needles and soil pressed flat in strange, uneven shapes. Too big for a man, too off-kilter for an animal. Whatever had been there, it had weight. Carl walked the edge of it, shaking his head. "Wasn't a bear," he said, voice flat. I didn't argue. We packed quick that morning, faster than I'd ever broken camp before. And though we didn't see or hear anything else, we both felt it, the smoke following us down the trail, curling in our wake until the clearing was far behind. I've told myself 100 times it was just the wind, just tricks of the fire and a weary mind. But some nights, when I'm out here again and the smoke won't leave me be, I remember that dragging step, that hollow breath, that shadow in the trees. And I wonder if maybe the smoke isn't just smoke at all. Maybe it's the way the woods keep their secrets, reminding us we're never truly alone.